Welcome to The Next Chapter, a show about how to move your life forward and what comes next. I'm your host, Carrie Pena, co-founder of the Center for Positive Media. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Pena, and this is The Next Chapter. With me in studio today is Albert Black, the founder and CEO of Recovery in the Pines. Albert, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I had to invite you because your story is one that a lot of people need to hear. It really, when you first told me the story, it blew me away about your cocaine addiction and how you nearly destroyed your entire family and how you came to acceptance of who you are as a human being and how you learn from that. So I want to start from the beginning. You describe for the audience what you told me about how you were a regular kid, like a good kid.
I was just a normal kid. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, as Sierra Vista, and just went to school, played sports, was just a normal kid. Graduated high school. I enrolled at the University of Arizona. And I really didn't party. I had tried to smoke pot once in high school. I didn't like it. My friends would be drinking. I had a beer, but I didn't like the way it made me feel. So I wasn't a big partier. And I get to college, and again, then, it's everybody's partying, drinking, and it's just this big party. And so I started drinking and, started liking it. And my sophomore year in college at the U of A, I joined a fraternity. And at the same time, my dad committed suicide. And so I don't want to blame it on that, but that's what was going on at that time. So my dad's gone. The authority in my life is gone. I'm starting to party. The party's ramping up. And I got introduced to cocaine. And from the very first time that I did it, I loved it. Before that, I couldn't imagine, doing anything like that, but I did. And I just fell in love with it. Just the feeling was great. I was partying, and at first it was fun. It started out as fun, but it soon turned on me. Some other friends did it with me. They didn't really like it. I liked it. So it just, then I started doing it in secret because that wasn't acceptable. The people that I hung out with weren't really about that. They drank, but nobody was doing hard drugs.
Right.
So I had this secret. So I had to learn to start lying really well and hiding it. And then I, did that all through my 20s. And,
how often were you doing cocaine?
At first it wasn't every day, probably a couple times a month, and it was small quantities. It wasn't a lot. I hadn't, developed a strong craving for it yet, but it progresses, so at first it's a couple times a month, then it's a couple times, then it's more frequent. Now it's every week, on Friday night or Saturday night, and then it's just constant. And so, I take it into my marriage. And I had been sober for about 6 months when I met my wife, and we went to dinner on our very first date, and she had a glass of wine and I had a beer. And I couldn't tell her that about my past. I didn't want to tell her, I would have scared her off. And so that night I had a drink, and then I was back at it again. So right from the very beginning of our dating, I was living a double life. I met her in church, so she thinks I'm this guy, but I have this secret. And so, soon we got married really quick. We dated, we were married in 3 months. I wouldn't recommend that for anybody, but we really wanted to get married. I was 34, she was 21. And so, we got married, and I have this secret. And soon she found out what was really going on. It just became evident that something was wrong with me. And, I was battling it from that point on until I got sober. It was off and on, but it was constant, and it was ugly.
And let's talk a little bit about what that feels like, because you have gone into the treatment industry. So you talk a lot to people about identifying when this substance abuse starts to take over your life. What can you describe what it feels like? You're describing a double life. Does that mean you would wake up and you were craving some sort of high?
I think what happens is we lie to ourselves. So I was lying to my family and friends and business partners and everybody around me, church, everyone. I was lying to me that it's not that bad. First, you tell yourself that you can do it. Like you can live two lives, because I was functioning. You're
successful. You're making money.
Right. I was having success. I got a wife, I got kids, I got standing in the community. So you're living a certain way. So you're delusional. I was telling myself it's okay. Look at what I have. I have a house. I have all of this stuff. But behind the scenes, my wife and I are having just problems. We're fighting. It's not stable. And so, it just slowly starts to deteriorate your relationship with everybody, with my kids, with my standing in the community. I mean, soon people, they're looking at me sideways. They don't know what's wrong with me. They just know something's wrong.
So were you showing up places on drugs?
At first, no, because I'm still managing it. I'm like, I'll only use when I'm by myself or this or that. But towards the end, I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed to say this, but my kids' elementary school was right down the street from us. And I volunteered to be the crossing guard in the morning, because that's what parents do, right? So I had been up all night using, and maybe a half an hour before I would go and be the volunteer crossing guard at my kids' school, just trying to keep it together. So, it didn't start out that way, but as my using progressed, I started to be showing up to places and I would be under the influence.
Psychologically, what was that doing to you?
Well, you torment yourself. Towards the end of my using, I just had these voices in my head, like, I can't go on like this anymore. I knew it was wrong. I hated myself. I hated this situation, but you don't know how to get out. And the problem with most addicts is we think we can just stop or do this by ourselves. You can't. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that can. I couldn't, and I think most can't. You need help. You need to ask for help. And so the only time you really do that is when you're broken and humble. I was humiliated. I was broken. And so I had no other choice but to ask for help.
And we're going to talk about that moment when your life changed in just a second. But I do want to tell the audience that Recovery in the Pines is in Prescott, Arizona. And I actually went to Prescott. I did an interview with you and your wife. And I want to say that your wife said some things that had to be really hard for you to hear. She talked about that she was at a point where she thought about suicide.
Right.
She thought about that she didn't want to go on in life because she was so devastated by your actions. And when I was viewing that recording, I mean, it gives me chills thinking about it. I saw your face and you looked a little in shock.
Yes.
That she was articulating that.
I've heard my wife, we've obviously been married 22 years and I've heard her talk, but this is the first time in 22 years. I've been sober 11 years, and the interview that you did was great. And it's another truth moment for me. As I sat there with my wife and listened to her tell her story and really listen, I was devastated. I was almost choked up. Like, it was unbearable. It took everything in me to listen to what I did to this woman that I love. That's the mother of my children. And I did some awful things. And when you're doing those things, you don't realize what you're doing. But it was really hard to hear. I'm grateful that I heard it, because it gives me more respect and appreciation for that she's even stayed with me, because 99% of women on this planet would have punted, they would have kicked me to the curb a long time ago. My wife's an amazing woman, and her faith is what it wasn't so much me. It was just her relationship with God that got her through that.
So I thought it was really courageous for you to sit there and listen to that. And I actually contemplated whether or not you were going to call and ask us not to use some of those portions, because that's pretty humiliating. Hearing your wife say that you caused her to almost want to take her own life, and then to basically say that you were this very extreme, abusive person.
Yes, I was the abuser. And so I think the more honest you get with yourself, it keeps me in check today. I can be that guy. That's not the guy that I was raised to be, but that's where addiction took me. And so that guy is still in me today. And so I don't ever want to forget this, the interview that you did with us. That again drives it more home. Again, it reminds me of what I'm capable of doing. I did some things that I would be like, if I saw someone else do that, their kids should be taken away. That person needs to go to jail. I did those things. And so I don't ever want to forget what I'm capable of doing. It keeps you humble.
What was the turning point when you just about crashed and burned?
Well, it was 11 years ago. Actually, it started right before April 5th. I started to get sober April 5th was my first sobriety date. But so in 2011, the beginning of the year, it was just so unbearable. I couldn't take it anymore. Just the mental torment that I was under. I just knew I needed to do something or this was going to end bad, like I've said. And so I started to seek out help, and I asked this one man to help me. And he told me, he said, you're going to close your businesses. You're not going to work for a year. You're going to go home and tell your wife everything, whether she leaves you or not. And I knew at that point that I needed to get really honest like I'd never been. And I was so desperate that I was like, okay. And I did that. I went and I told my wife, this guy wants me to close my businesses and not work for a year. And I don't think I gave her a play-by-play of everything that I did, but I gave her the big picture. I go, if you think it, I did it. And if
like cheating,
what I did is I was going to strip clubs. So I would come to Phoenix. I had a real estate business and a mortgage business. So I would come to Phoenix, and I could come down here and I would buy cocaine, and I'd end up in a hotel room, and I might stop at a strip club for an hour. The good thing, I think the cocaine is what kept me from doing things, because I would always get it. I had the intent to do bad things, to be unfaithful and things, but I would always end up in a hotel room locked down because I didn't like to drive around and be high running around. So I'm grateful. Well, I don't know if I'm grateful, but that's what stopped me from doing what I intended to do.
Mm-hmm. And so when you had to get honest, and for the audience, you have 3 beautiful children,
yes.
Just incredible children. And so you had described to me you would come to Phoenix and do all of these things and go on a binge and be spending, I'm assuming, a lot of money too,
yes.
In that process. And then you'd go back to Prescott, and here you'd be driving up your driveway, and here's your wife and your little kids. That mental torture, I mean, that just has to take its toll of chipping away at you as a human being to
yes,
live like
I
that.
remember the one thing that sticks out to me the most. It was Easter weekend, and I had come to Phoenix on a Thursday, and I got some cocaine, and my intent was always to go home because we lie to ourselves. I'm going to get some. I'm going to, do a little. I'll get home. I'll do it all weekend. But I started to do it, and I knew I couldn't finish driving home. And I went through Wickenburg because I was like, there's less highway patrol on that. I'm going to go the back way instead of up I-17. So I get to Wickenburg, and I'm like, I'm just going to check into a hotel for 3 hours. I'm going to do, have a little fun, get high, and I'll go home. Well, that was on Thursday. I show up Sunday morning. It's Easter Sunday morning. I show up in the suit I had left in, all disheveled, and it's, I pull up in my driveway at 8, and my wife, my mother-in-law, my mom, my kids were in the front yard because Karen kind of just went on as, she knew I was somewhere all jacked up. And so I pull up in my driveway, and there's my family in the front yard doing Easter. And I look at Karen, she looks at me, we know what's been going on. And I just walk in the house, and they were on their way to church, after that. And I didn't go to church that morning. And yeah, you just feel like you're the biggest loser. And so that was a part of the beginning of the end too.
So the sobriety, you had this gentleman who
Yes.
said, I will help you if
Right.
you agree to help yourself by
Correct.
getting totally honest.
Yes.
And then what happened?
So I asked this man, saved my life, Mitch. He's passed away. He passed away 2 years when I was sober. I don't think he liked me at first. He was one of the tough guys in the room, a Vietnam vet. He I know he didn't like me. I was in and out of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, but that day he sat next to me in a meeting, and I knew I needed help. And I just asked him, and I knew I needed a man that wouldn't buy my BS, cause I could BS a lot of people. And so I can dominate, it's kind of my personality. I'm type A personality, but this guy just told me the way it was going to go. If he was going to help me. And again, I was just desperate enough and enough pain that I said yes. And I just started down that path, and we just did one thing at a time. And here I am 11 years later.
So one day of sobriety, then that's a win.
Right.
And then you just start building upon that one win and turn that into a week. And is that how that sort of gained momentum? Yeah.
When I first started, I was like, I just want a year. I just want a year to be sober. I'd never been sober before I started using, so I was like, I need to get a year. And so, it was just one day at a time. I didn't work that first year. And I remember in the middle of that year, I was getting bored and I was getting antsy. And I told my wife, I need to go work. I need to do something. And she's like, nope, you're going to do what you said for the first time. You're going to have integrity. You told Mitch you wouldn't work for a year. You're not going to work. And so my wife held me accountable. And I was given a special gift. I know there's a lot of people in a lot of situations that don't have support from their family. I had support. I had a strong, godly wife that was like, you're going to do this. She didn't let me out.
No. And when I asked her, why did you stay with him? I mean, after what she just described to me, she said, and she was tearful. She said, I think my faith.
Right.
My faith. And you are very blessed to have someone who believes in you. Talk about how you came to Recovery in the Pines and wanting to open up a facility that you felt, based on your own experience and what you had learned, you felt that you could truly help people transform.
Right. Well, I never thought I would own a treatment center. Like, that was never on my radar. Again, I owned a real estate and a mortgage company in Prescott, Arizona. And, I moved to Prescott 20 years ago. My wife's from Prescott. And so that's why I end up there. I moved there because I thought, if I get away from Southern Arizona, I don't know anyone up there. I can start over. Well, that wasn't the case. But so I get up there, and I noticed, that there was a lot of treatment centers and I'm not sober yet, but I'm paying attention to businesses and stuff like that. And towards the end of my using, and I started to think this way, like, I need to do something. So I started to get sober, and I started to look at treatment and how it was being done. And it doesn't work the way it was being done. It's, 30, 60, 90 days. And then people go back home and they go back to doing the same thing. So I looked at, it needed to be long-term. When I decided that I was going to do this, I wanted people to have my experience. So I brought in, exercise the way I exercised as a young kid, wrestling. We do CrossFit, so it's intense. How I was brought into my faith by some men that discipled me and taught me. It was very intense. So I bring that type of intensity in our faith. And, clinically, I just brought some people with some big reputations that are great therapists. So we look at our faith, we look at our physical component, our mental component, and then life skills. I saw that treatment, again, you can go and get a lot of information and learn things about yourself and why you do things, but how do you apply that to your life? And so, again, in a long-term setting, I can teach you how to live a certain way. In 30, 60, 90 days, I can just inform you of some things, but you haven't practiced it yet. So these were all the things that were running around in my head. And I think it was inspired by God. I don't think this is all from God. This isn't me.
So your program is a minimum of
6 months to a year.
Who are the people who can commit that kind of time? I mean, and I'll just ask you the straight question. I mean, is this just like rich people or, because who can leave their job for that long?
Right. Well,
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that would be the question that comes to my head.
Right. Well, we have, a wide range of people. So just the range of people that we've had is I've had the owner of a pro sports team in our program. I've had one of the largest pastors in the world, preaches to 100 million people a week. I've had reality star shows. I've had athletes. Executives, 18-year-old kids. So a wide range of people. I would say that 80%, 75, 80% of our patients are in the 18 to 35-year-old, that failure to launch age group. They can check out for 6 months to a year. When I deal with executives, we do have an executive program. They're there anywhere from 30 to 90 days, but we still engage them outpatient after that.
Your wife said where you really shine, and she's the most proud of you, is when you do the interventions, because she said that you really have found your stride in, as you put it, to give this discipleship. And I'm assuming that for you, looking at an 18-year-old or a 22-year-old, you would have to think about yourself.
Right. Well, that's exactly right. My story is my story. I grew up how I grew up. I was raised how I was raised. My experiences are my experiences. And I think, there's nothing special about them. I'm pretty normal, and there's a lot of normal kids. I talk to moms who got the 21-year-old kid. I remember, the trauma that I had, like when my dad committed suicide, there was no one there. It's not because anyone was bad. I went to counseling when my dad died once a month for maybe 6 months. That's not going to do anything. There was no one there that really, I'm going to school at the University of Arizona. The first semester I get Fs, right? And I have to let them know why so I can enroll again. I'm like, my dad committed suicide. I stopped going to classes. I just bomb it. They didn't have any apparatus or systems that would have said, hey, we're going to give you somebody that can walk with you. We know you're going through a hard time. So then I fail all my classes. Then second semester, it's like repeat, and it's, so that was my experience. So today when I talk to young people that have had trauma, their parents are divorced and they're all of the things that people go through. It's like my parents were divorced. So I can speak to I know what it feels like to have divorced parents. I know what it's like to have a parent that commits suicide. Now, I don't know every bad thing, but those are my experiences. And so you really need to take charge of somebody's life. See, they don't think they need help, but the record shows that they do. And
how much do you think trauma contributes to addiction?
It's everything. And it's early childhood trauma. And just to clarify, when I talk about, you'll hear me talk about my father and my dad. My biological father was never in my life. My dad is who I talk a lot about. And so my mom and my biological father divorced when I was 1. He was a Marine. My mom was in the Navy. This was during Vietnam. And so my mom's divorced when I'm 1, and she meets my dad when I'm 3. He adopted me. And so, that's who I say committed suicide, because he did when I was 19. And, the childhood trauma, that's what forms you. People think it's no big deal. And I used to believe that too. Oh, it's no big deal. I've been living with it my whole life. But it sets you up for certain patterns, certain behavioral patterns in the way I handle problems and stress and everything like that. Today, I'm not thinking about my dad's death. I mean, unless I'm talking about it. But there's things that trigger me certain times of the year, the way people talk, circumstances, like on an unconscious level, on a subconscious level, I feel things, and it's from something that happened 30 years ago.
What stops you from relapsing?
Well, my relationship with God, and it's every day I remember who I was. Every day I remember what my wife said. I have to, when I wake up in the morning, I pray. I have this relationship with God, and I don't want to forget my past. And that's, I'm capable of going back to doing that. A lot of people go back after being sober for a long time. I don't want to forget. So I just stay mindful every day. I'm not walking around on eggshells. I go and do what I want, but I also don't put myself in situations that I know are dangerous.
So do you stay away from all substances, including alcohol?
All substances. I don't even like to eat food that's been cooked in alcohol. I don't take cough medicine that has alcohol in it. I don't take anything. I don't take any mind-altering substances.
And for each person, the journey is different. I mean, some folks can, if they've had a cocaine addiction, they can handle having some wine or what have you, right? Or do you subscribe to that you should cut everything
I
out?
believe in abstinence. It's if someone, let's say they were addicted to cocaine or marijuana, if you drink, we all know when you drink, you relax, you have fun. You're just more susceptible to things. I'm not willing to take that chance. Yeah, I'd like to have a beer, but I know if I have a beer, I just open the door. Because then I'm going to have 2 beers.
So in your mind, when you have an urge, because I'm assuming sometimes that comes up where you're stressed and you're like, God, what do you do to gut check yourself?
Well, I have people around me that are just like me. So I talk to them. I talk to my wife. I mean, she knows when I'm stressed. I don't necessarily, I feel like everyone else. I have good days and bad days and all the challenges that we have with life. I just, when I feel like I need relief, I have a solution today that a lot of people haven't been afforded. But in my recovery process, I have tools that I use, and I feel blessed.
And yours is a faith-based program. It's not to say that everyone has to be super religious who comes to see you, but you are a faith-based program. What does that mean? So
I'm a Christian. I wouldn't say, that's a big word. That means a lot of things to a lot of people. I'm not a Boy Scout. I sin. I'm not perfect, but I believe in Jesus Christ and I want to follow him. And I do things, things I did 10 years ago, I don't do today. Things I did 3 months ago, I don't, I'm evolving, I'm maturing. And so faith does mean a lot of things to a lot of people. You don't have to be a Christian to come to our program. We've had, I've had atheists, I've had every kind of person, but we are going to expose you to that. And, you get to make a decision.
What is your hope for recovery in the Pines?
Well, I think my hope for recovery in the Pines would be that we start to look at mental health in a different way, that we get honest. Treatment doesn't work. The success rate is less than 10%. I have a court thing tomorrow, and I look at how the legal system, I'm going just because I'm a victim of somebody like us, and I look at how the court systems and how the insurance companies and how we deal with these types of issues, and we're failing. We just are. Everybody knows it. But we keep doing things the same way. Insurance, you just run them through this gauntlet and you hope they get it. The legal system, we stick them in drug court, we stick them in jail. We don't really fix the problem. We just do what we've always done. And my hope for recovery in the Pines is we have done things different. We haven't done what the other people are doing, and our success speaks for itself.
What is your success rate?
Well, that's a great question. So I get that asked from people all the time, what's your success rate? If I get 10 people today, 9 of them will get a year. And so it's hard to say after that, people that have those statistics, I don't think people are staying in touch with people 3 to 5 years. I think we're really good at launching people and giving people a chance. But, this is something that all the people that come to our program, and they may not get it the first time they come, but we planted some seeds and hopefully they'll get it down the road. But yeah, I think, 90% for a year, I'd probably say we're at 50 or 60% after, 3 years, but it's hard to say.
And just as we wrap things up, Albert, what does it feel like for you when you personally are able to help someone transform their life who was going down a dark path? Well,
and that's the payday. When I see young men put their lives back together, get married, have kids, graduate college, that is what really gets me excited.
You are living proof, though, that you can have a good life, a life where you're not lying to yourself, a life where you're not in anguish every day. Yeah. It's possible.
I've been set free. I used to be a slave. And again, I'm still a human being. I have challenges, but I just have a different way of living today. And I'm not, I know that I'm going to come home to my wife today and to my children, and they can count on me, and I can have real, honest relationships. That's really what it's about. My success is my relationships, with my family and my friends. All the other stuff, is just whatever.
Where can people find out more about Recovery in the Pines?
Well, you can go to our website, recoveryinthepines.com. You can call me. I don't mind giving my phone number, 928-308-4311. But yeah, go to our website. All our information is there at recoveryinthepines.com. And, you can contact me anytime. I'm available.
I rarely have someone give out their personal cell phone number. That's legit.
Call me. This phone rings all the time. I talk to people at 10 o'clock at night. I talk to people on Saturdays during holidays. Because when people call me, it's a 911 call. You have a mom or a wife. I've had teenage kids call me about their parents. And I can think of a couple that we had in our program. That's the success. So a gentleman, his daughter called me, and he was just in my living room on Thanksgiving because he had come to Prescott to visit some other family. And my wife reminded me that his daughter had called me initially. And Here he's been sober for a while. That's exciting.
That's incredible. Well, this is your next chapter.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Albert. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Carrie.
And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. The Next Chapter. I'm Carrie Pena.